Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back to a time when comfort was a blanket made of rough wool and your nightly lullaby was the sound of distant church bells tolling for someone else's soul. You're lying in a small bed stuffed with straw, probably sneezing because you're allergic to the straw. It's the mid 1300s, and Europe feels ordinary until it isn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a world that feels almost cozy in its ignorance. The fields ripple with barley and poppies. Sheep dot the hills, and your biggest worry is whether the baker will still have those crusty rye loaves left by the time you get there. The village is small, wooden cottages, a muddy lane, maybe 50 families, all gossiping through thin walls. You wake up every morning to the smell of dung, yeast, and smoke, essentially the medieval version of a city commute. Life moves at a slow, earthy rhythm. You trudge to the well with a bucket, trade jokes about the priest's sermons, and maybe dream of one day owning a second pair of shoes. People still measure their fortunes by how well their pigs are doing, not by the latest gossip from Venice or the East. You've probably never seen the ocean, though ships are the reason your world is about to change forever. The year is around 1347. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, sailors are unloading cargo in a Sicilian port. Among the sacks of grain and bolts of cloth are fleas, tiny, unremarkable, but more lethal than any sword. They have been hitching rides on black rats from ships traveling the Silk Road, carrying something no one can see, something that doesn't care whether you're rich, pious, or careful. You, of course, don't know this. You're busy worrying about the harvest, or the bishop's tax collector, who always looks like he enjoys his job too much. Maybe you've heard a faint rumor of strange sickness in the East, whispered by a traveling friar who smells like rain and fatigue. He says entire cities are empty now. You laugh awkwardly and tell yourself he's exaggerating. Everyone knows travelers tell wild stories. The days stretch into summer, warm and golden. You sweat while threshing grain. Complain about your aching back and drink ale that tastes slightly off because water isn't safe to drink. Kids chase chickens, dogs bark, and life feels survivable. Historians still argue whether Europe was already weakened by famine, by bad weather, by sheer bad luck when the plague arrived. Maybe your immune system is already tired from years of hunger. Maybe that makes what's coming inevitable. Either way, you feel healthy now, blissfully unaware that somewhere out there, death is boarding a ship with a ticket to your continent. You walk home at dusk, listening to frogs croak in the ditches and neighbors calling out, "Good night." There's no electricity, no hum of traffic, just the shuffle of feet and the smell of wood smoke curling from every chimney. It's peaceful, the kind of peace that feels permanent, though nothing ever really is. Your family eats in the dim light of a tallow candle. Bread, onions, maybe some salted fish if you're lucky. You mumble a prayer you've said 1,000 times before. There's comfort in repetition, until those same words start to sound like pleas instead of gratitude. For now, though, your world feels safe, predictable, small enough to understand. At the tavern, gossip drifts between mugs of ale. Someone mentions strange letters from merchants in Genoa. Ships quarantined, sailors dying mid-voyage, something about a curse. You shrug it off. People die of fevers all the time. Probably bad shellfish, you joke, earning a few uneasy laughs. Still, the talk lingers in your mind like a mosquito bite you can't stop scratching. The next morning you notice something peculiar. The priest's sermons have grown longer, his voice tighter. He warns of God's wrath, of sins that must be confessed. You roll your eyes, he says that every Sunday. But there's an edge of fear now, a tremor, when he talks about the East. It's as if even he, the one meant to have divine reassurance, has started to doubt it. Meanwhile, the merchants in your nearest town complain about trade slowing down. Fewer ships, fewer goods, fewer coins, changing hands. One merchant claims rats are infesting every ship, biting through sacks of flour, spoiling cargo. You picture the beady eyes and twitching whiskers and feel a little queasy. But still, what's a few rats? Every granary has them. You go about your chores. You beat the rugs, milk the goats, argue with your brother over who gets the last crust of bread. Life is so ordinary it's almost boring, which is exactly how it should be before disaster hits. There's a strange beauty in monotony, isn't there? You never realize you're living in the before times until they're gone. That night, as you drift toward sleep, you think you hear something faint in the distance, a bell tolling where no one should be dying yet. You tell yourself it's the wind. You close your eyes. You dream of warm bread, of laughter, of nothing at all. You probably won't survive this, but for now, you're blissfully unaware. Weeks later, travelers bring news that makes your stomach knot. Entire households in the southern ports are dying within days. Bodies stacked like firewood. Some say it's punishment. Others say it's a poison in the air. You can't decide which is worse, the idea that it's divine or that it's random. But that's not your problem yet, right? Your problem is the leaky roof and the goose that refuses to lay eggs. You shake off the fear, because what else can you do? You light a candle, whisper a quick prayer, and watch the flame tremble as if it knows something you don't. The dogs bark at nothing. The rats scurry unseen beneath the floorboards. The world still turns, but something dark is sailing closer. And though you don't feel it yet, the air is changing, just enough that if you paid attention, you'd notice a chill creeping into the edges of your dreams. The first rumors float into your sleepy village like cold fog. A merchant's cart creaks down the muddy road, his horse gaunt and spooked. He says the ports are closed. Whole ships, he whispers, drifting in with no one left alive to moor them. You laugh politely, though something in his eyes makes you uneasy. Days later, the baker's apprentice swears he saw a body cart in the next town. Not a coffin, just a wooden barrow piled with cloth-wrapped shapes. You tell yourself it's gossip. People get fevers all the time. Still, you catch yourself watching the horizon when the wind blows from the south, as if the sickness might be riding it. The air feels thicker now. The priest talks about pestilence. The barber talks about foreign miasmas, and you talk about neither, because you'd rather discuss the price of eggs than death. But it's coming, one rumor, one cough, one flea at a time. You trudge through the market where the usual chatter feels subdued. The fishmonger wipes his hands too often. The herb seller mutters extra prayers. Someone sneezes, and 3 people step back. You roll your eyes. Humans have always been dramatic. But you wash your hands in the trough just in case. Historians still argue whether people understood contagion or just coincidence. You don't have words like bacteria or pathogen. All you know is that illness seems to follow ships, cities, and sinners, and maybe cats, because someone swore cats brought bad luck. Spoiler, Killing cats to stop rats was not the cleverest move in history. One evening, you overhear the miller's wife whispering to her friend. Her cousin in Marseille saw sailors with black lumps under their arms, boils, oozing, and fatal within days. "It's the punishment for greed," she hisses. You pretend you're not listening, but your stomach knots. A week later, another rumor arrives, this one louder. A trader passes through on his way north, urging everyone to flee inland. "It's the plague," he insists, voice trembling. "People drop dead in the streets." The blacksmith scoffs, swinging his hammer defiantly. "There's always a plague somewhere," he grumbles. Life goes on. You nod in agreement, because what else can you do? But that night, as you lie awake, the wind seems to carry a faint ringing, church bells tolling endlessly, far away. By morning, the rhythm of the village feels off. The innkeeper closes early. Travelers vanish. You notice rats everywhere, brazen in daylight, their fur slick and tails twitching. They slip under your door like shadows. You try to trap them, but they always return. One sneaks into your grain sack, leaving behind something you can't see. Fleas, tiny and hungry. A single bite, nothing special. You scratch it, curse, and move on. That's how ordinary it starts. Daily life continues, but it's as if someone turned the color down on the world. The laughter feels forced, the songs quieter. The cobbler hums hymns under his breath. A friar arrives preaching repentance, his voice hoarse. He claims the pestilence has reached Genoa, then Pisa. It's crawling up Italy like ivy on a wall. You picture maps you've never seen, lines of infection threading their way across lands you can't imagine. You wonder how far away Genoa really is. It sounds distant enough to ignore. Probably. Historians still argue whether the plague spread faster by ship or by land caravans. You don't know about trade routes or Mongol armies flinging corpses over fortress walls. Yes, that actually happened. You just know that travelers, once exciting, now feel dangerous. You catch yourself holding your breath when strangers pass. Soon, the churchyard grows busier, not with funerals yet, but with prayers. The priest sprinkles extra holy water on everyone like seasoning. He insists faith will protect the righteous. You think about how many righteous people you know and decide not to test the theory. Then comes the smell. You notice it one dawn while fetching water. The air feels wrong, metallic, sour, as if the earth itself is sweating fear. The butcher swears it's bad meat. The healer blames the swamp. You blame your imagination, but the smell lingers. You find yourself glancing at faces more often. Was that cough new? Did your neighbor look pale yesterday? You start avoiding crowds, though you tell yourself it's just because you prefer quiet. You stop shaking hands. You mutter a quick prayer when someone sneezes near you. The world is shrinking into suspicion. By midsummer, fear becomes a background noise you can't turn off. Even the children play quieter. Your cat stares at the rafters as if it knows something you don't. Fun fact, medieval people believed animals could sense death coming. Whether that's true or not, your cat's timing is suspiciously good. A tinker arrives at dusk begging for food. You hesitate, torn between pity and paranoia. You give him bread through the window instead of the door. He thanks you, coughing. By morning, he's gone. You tell yourself he moved on. You want to believe that. The church bells start tolling more often now, not constantly, just enough that you notice. The priest doesn't name the dead anymore. There are too many unconfirmed fevers. You light a candle each night, trying to ward off whatever's coming. It feels superstitious, childish even, but it's something to do with your hands. You overhear talk of miasma, poisoned air, invisible but deadly. Some people hang bundles of herbs by their windows. Others burn pitch to cleanse the air. You follow suit, filling your cottage with smoke so thick your eyes water. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't, but at least it smells better than fear. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually believed in bad air or just used it as shorthand for, we have no idea what's happening. Either way, the theory gives you a sense of control. That's worth more than truth sometimes. Then one morning, you see something that makes denial impossible. A wagon creaks through town, carrying sacks, not grain, not goods, but bodies. The driver keeps his scarf over his mouth. You recognize a hand slipping from under the canvas. It looks familiar. You don't speak for hours. You scrub your hands raw. You decide not to go to church that week. By nightfall, the tavern is silent. The hearth burns low. People stare at the door every time it creaks. You sip ale that tastes like ashes and wonder how long until your name becomes a whisper, too. Still, there's a strange calm in the waiting. The human brain, you realize, can normalize almost anything. You go through motions, feed the goats, fetch the water, mend the roof, as if routine might build a wall against reality. You start to measure safety by absence. No new coughs, no new bells, no new whispers. For now, that's enough. But deep down, you sense the shift. You know the plague isn't just a rumor anymore. It's a scent, a silence, a shadow growing at the edge of your candlelight. And tomorrow, you'll wake to find the first true sign that it's finally here. Morning breaks with a sky the color of pewter and a stillness that feels unnatural, like the world is holding its breath. You stretch, blink, and think the quiet might be comforting, until you realize it's too quiet. No merchants calling out, no clatter of buckets at the well. Even the birds seem to have decided to take the day off. You step outside and see the first real proof that the plague has arrived. A rat sits in the middle of the lane, bold as a king. Its fur is matted, eyes glossy. It doesn't flinch when you move closer, doesn't run when you toss a pebble. It just stares, as if it knows something you don't. Then it twitches, collapses, and lies still. You feel a prick of dread, small but sharp. The wind shifts, carrying a faint, sour smell you can't quite place. You turn back towards your door and close it fast. That's when the scratching begins. You hear it in the walls that night, faint at first, like fingernails tapping wood. The sound of small claws, gnawing, squeaking. Rats. You bang the wall with your shoe, they pause, then start again. You stuff rags into every crack and hole, whispering a prayer you half remember. You don't know that the real danger isn't the rats themselves, but the fleas riding their fur like tiny assassins. You can't see them, but they're already in your bedclothes, your flour sacks, your future. Historians still argue whether the plague was carried more by fleas on rats or fleas on humans. Some even claim the rats are innocent, scapegoated like so many others. But as you lie awake listening to the walls come alive, innocence feels like a luxury word. The next morning the scratching stops, but only because there's nothing left to eat. The rats have moved on, and you take that as a sign of good fortune. It's not. You find out when you visit your neighbor, old Marta, who hasn't come to the well in days. You knock on her door, no answer. You push it open. The smell hits first. It's thick and sweet, like rotten fruit left too long in the sun. You gag, pull your sleeve over your nose, and call out again. Marta lies in her bed, eyes open, skin gray-green. Her neck is swollen, a dark lump the size of an egg pressing through the skin. You step back, your pulse hammering. You don't scream. You can't. You just close the door and stand outside, staring at nothing until the priest's bell rings again. That's the moment it becomes real. Not rumor, not warning. Reality. The plague has chosen your village. Within days, the world narrows to survival. You avoid people, though you live shoulder to shoulder. You hold your breath passing others in the lane. The market closes. The tavern locks its doors. The blacksmith stops hammering because there's no one left to buy horseshoes. The silence grows heavy again, pressing against your chest. The rats, ironically, vanish, either dead or clever enough to flee, but their legacy lingers. You wake with a new itch every morning, scratching without thinking. Your skin tingles in fear of something too small to see. You try washing with lye soap until your hands crack, convinced cleanliness might save you. You see your first funeral soon after. Not the usual quiet procession with candles and chants. This one is rushed, fearful. 2 men carry a wrapped body on a cart, faces covered with scarves. The priest sprinkles holy water from a distance, muttering faster than usual. No family follows. You realize why. Whole households are falling sick together, too fast for mourning. You watch from behind your shutters, heart thudding. The cart creaks away, leaving wheel ruts in the mud. You swear the air feels heavier afterward. Historians still argue whether the psychological shock of the plague reshaped Europe as much as the disease itself. For you, though, there's no debate. It's already reshaping your heartbeat, your faith, your sense of time. Days don't pass now, they drag. Nights stretch endlessly, filled with phantom scratching and the faint toll of bells. One afternoon, a group of children runs through the lane singing something eerie. It sounds like a nursery rhyme, high-pitched and strange. Ring-a roses, a pocket full of posies. They twirl, laugh, then scatter when the priest yells at them to go home. You stand frozen, wondering how something so innocent can sound so much like prophecy. Later, you catch your reflection in a bowl of water and realize you look different. Your eyes are rimmed red from smoke and sleeplessness. You've started talking to yourself out loud because silence feels too much like company. You hum songs to drown out your thoughts, then stop because the echo frightens you. A rumor spreads that cats and dogs carry the pestilence. People start killing them in panic. You feel sick watching it, but fear overrides pity. You bury your own cat behind the shed one morning. Tears hot and useless. That night, the rats return. The irony would be funny if it weren't tragic. Historians still argue how much the cat killings worsened the plague. Modern scholars roll their eyes. You just roll up your sleeves and block the door with firewood, praying the scratching won't start again. And yet, life insists on continuing. Bread must be baked. Water must be fetched. You share fewer words now, but nods and glances carry more meaning than speeches. The baker leaves loaves on a table outside his shop, coins in one bowl, bread in another. Because touching feels dangerous, you drop your coin, snatch your loaf, hurry home. That's when you notice your hands trembling. You tell yourself it's hunger. A week later, the priest stops ringing the bells. He's coughing too hard. You think about leaving, but where would you go? The roads are said to be full of thieves desperate men and corpses. So you stay, lighting more candles until the wax runs low. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and time. You hang the herbs from your rafters because someone said they purify the air. You tell yourself you can survive this if you're clever, careful, quiet. You hear a distant cry one night, someone calling for help, then silence. You don't move. You whisper, "God forgive me," and stay where you are. In the morning, you find a trail of footprints leading past your door. One set ends in the mud, faintly marked by a dark stain. You look away. There's a numbness now, a kind of acceptance. The plague isn't a visitor. It's a new law of nature. You learn to live around it like weather. You eat less, sleep less, pray more. You start noticing odd details, the way smoke curls differently when someone nearby dies, or how the crows gather early before a funeral. Maybe it's imagination, maybe not. Every sound becomes a question, every cough a prophecy. You speak softer, as if noise itself might summon death. And somewhere inside you, something begins to shift. Not quite hope, not yet despair. Just the faint understanding that you are living through something immense, something that will not end neatly. You pull the blanket tighter that night, listen for the scratching that no longer comes, and realize you miss it. The silence feels worse. You wake to shouting, the kind that doesn't stop when the echo fades. You stumble outside, half expecting a fire, but the street is empty, except for a man standing by the market well. He's screaming about demons. You recognize him. It's Tomas, the cooper. His wife, Anna, lies slumped beside the well, her skin dark with blotches. People peer from behind shutters, but no one steps closer. Tomas grabs the bucket rope and sobs, "She drank the water!" Then he runs into the woods and doesn't come back. That's how it begins, the visible unraveling. The moment fear stops being something you whisper about and starts being something you can see in daylight. You edge closer to the well, then stop. You can smell her from here. You know what that means. You turn around, heart hammering. No one rings the bell this time. There's no priest left to do it. By evening, the village feels hollow. You've known every family for years, but the doors are barred now, curtains drawn. You knock at one or two just to check, but the silence behind them feels like a warning. The cobbler's shop stands open, tools scattered, leather stiffening in the sun. You find half a loaf of bread on the counter, mold creeping up its side. You take it anyway. Hunger trumps disgust now. You tell yourself the mold might even help. Some kind of medicine. Funny how hope grows desperate when logic runs out. You pass the tavern. The door creaks open when the wind shifts, revealing overturned mugs and a smell that makes you gag. You shut it fast. Historians still argue whether villages like yours emptied from death or abandonment first, whether fear killed more people than plague. It's hard to tell the difference, especially now that fear is the air you breathe. You try to hold on to routine. You fetch water, though you no longer trust the well. You boil it, muttering thanks for firewood that still burns. You bake flatbread that tastes like ashes. You hum while kneading the dough because silence feels too heavy. But there's a new sound now, coughing, not from one house, but several. It starts in the distance and moves closer, like a slow tide. You stop humming. You listen. That night, you dream of waves, black water lapping at your door. You wake to find your mouth dry, your skin clammy. The air smells faintly of rot even inside. You open the window to escape it, But the stench outside is worse. Someone's burning clothes in the street. You see the glow through the smoke. Neighbors tossing garments, bedding, anything touched by sickness. One woman throws in a doll. Another adds a Bible. The flames crackle, greedy and red. You stand there, the heat on your face, thinking maybe fire really can cleanse. The next day, the corpse wagon returns. You watch from your window as two men drag bodies from houses. One man wears a cloth tied over his nose. The other just squints against the smell. They don't bother with prayers anymore, just a grunt, a heave, the dull thud of bodies landing. You spot a familiar sleeve among the shrouds. You can't place it, but it makes your throat tighten. You step back, close the shutter, and sink to the floor. You stay there until dusk, when the rats come to sniff under your door. A strange calm settles over you. It's not courage, it's exhaustion, pretending to be bravery. That night, a knock rattles your door. You freeze. The sound comes again. 3 soft taps. You whisper, "Who's there?" No answer. You grip the handle, trembling. Slowly, you open it an inch. A child stands there, barefoot, eyes glazed. You recognize her. It's the baker's daughter. She says nothing, just sways on her feet. You reach out before you can stop yourself, but then you see the lump under her jaw swollen and black. You slam the door and slide the bolt. Your hands shake for an hour. When you finally look out again, she's gone. Historians still argue how children were treated during plague outbreaks, protected, abandoned, or weaponized by panic. For you, there's no argument. You still hear the echo of her knocking days later. You start talking to the air, to anyone who might be listening. Maybe God, maybe yourself. You apologize for slamming the door. You promise to do better if you survive. You promise things you can't keep. Kindness, patience, a pilgrimage if the world ever rights itself. You also promise to stop eating your emergency cheese stash all at once, but that resolution lasts about 10 minutes. Even despair needs snacks. By now, your body aches from tension. Your dreams grow feverish. Rats in priestly robes, bells tolling underwater, faces without eyes. You wake gasping, drenched in sweat. The candle burns low. You light another. Outside, life continues in strange ways. A group of flagellants passes through the village one afternoon, bare-chested, backs bleeding, chanting Latin hymns. They believe the plague is divine punishment, and whipping themselves will earn forgiveness. You watch them from your window, morbidly fascinated. The rhythm of their chants is almost hypnotic. You catch yourself mouthing the words, though you don't understand them. One of them meets your gaze, eyes wild, and points upward. "Confess," he shouts. You slam the shutter again. Later, you wonder if he was right. Maybe you should confess something, even if you're not sure what. The days blend together now. You've stopped counting. You eat less because your stomach shrinks with dread. The bells ring sporadically, sometimes for hours, sometimes not at all. You can't tell whether that means more death or fewer people left to ring them. A strange thought creeps in. What if you're already dead? What if this quiet is the afterlife? Then you laugh softly because if this is heaven, someone owes you a refund. You find small comforts where you can. The warmth of sunlight through the shutter crack, the taste of rainwater, the creak of your floorboards, reminding you that the house still stands. Historians still argue whether the plague changed people's faith or merely revealed what was already cracked beneath it. You feel the answer somewhere deep. Faith, like breath, becomes instinct under pressure. You still pray, but your words are simpler now. Please, not yet. Thank you. You start leaving food for the stray dog that lingers by the road, ribs sharp beneath its fur. You toss it scraps through the fence, its company of a sort. Then one evening, it stops coming. You find it later by the ditch, still and silent. You bury it with a broken spoon, whispering, "Sorry." You've become fluent in apology. That night, a storm rolls in. Rain lashes the shutters. Wind howls like the dead have found voices. You huddle beneath your blanket, trying to pretend it's just weather, not the world cleansing itself. You think of Tomas and his wife by the well, of the child at your door, of the rats that once ruled your walls. You realize the storm isn't punishment or blessing. It's simply indifferent, like the plague. Like time itself. When morning comes, the air smells clean again. For the first time in weeks, you step outside. The ground glistens with rain, washing away footprints, ashes, blood. Everything looks almost beautiful. Almost. You don't mean to watch, but the sound draws you. The soft slap of leather on skin, the low hum of voices moving as one, the shuffle of bare feet on wet earth. You ease the shutter a finger's width, and the world outside narrows to a thin ribbon of street. Through it, you see them return, the flagellants. They move like a river of pale backs and dark hoods, each man stripped to the waist, each arm swinging a scourge tipped with knots. Blood beads, then runs in thin red threads, and their chanting rises and falls like a bellows. You hold your breath, as if air itself might be contagious. They halt at the crossroad and kneel, foreheads to mud. The leader raises his hand, sermon simple. You can't hear the words, but the meaning is plain. Sin, wrath, mercy, repeat. Then the whips rise again. Snap, snap. The sound has a rhythm you could count sheep to if it weren't flaying people. You step back from the shutter, press your spine to the cool plaster, and try to inhale without tasting iron. Historians still argue whether these processions help or harm, whether the spectacle consoles the frightened or inflames the fearful, whether the flagellants themselves spread the pestilence as they wander from town to town. You don't need a treatise. You just see the way neighbors lean toward the procession like flowers to a sun that burns. Hope is hope, even when it stings. You make your small house smaller, shutters closed, cloth under the door, an herb bundle smoking in the coals like thanksgiving to the stove gods. You cradle a cup of sour ale and whisper a joke to steady yourself. Congratulations, you've invented the medieval home gym, high-intensity interval penitence. It's a tired joke, and it makes you smile anyway. Humor is the only thing you can still share without touching. Outside, the chant resumes. Some say the men do this for 33 and a half days, one day for each year of Christ's life. Then move on. That's a mainstream fact the friar swore by before his voice went hoarse and his courage followed. You picture their calendar marked not by feasts, but by fresh welts, their discipline a clock that bleeds. A second joke drifts through. If a Fitbit existed, it would close their penance ring by sunrise. You snort softly and set the cup down, because even laughing feels loud. The longer you stay inside, the more the room feels like a body you're trapped in. The walls have breath. The beams have aching joints. You take to whispering to the rafters just to hear a voice. You speak in gentle scolds, eat, drink, sleep, as if to a stubborn friend who won't. When the wind hushes, you hear the processions farther away on the road that leads to the next village. The leathers murmur like rain on a thatched roof. You realize the quiet between the strikes is the part that lingers. You try to make sense of what helps. Garlic hung over the lintel? Sure. Vinegar sipped warm? Why not? You mash rosemary and thyme into a paste and dab it at your wrists, pretending it's a shield. A quirky tidbit slips into the ritual. A neighbor swears by a pomander stuffed with ambergris and clove, claiming the rich in far-off courts carry them like fashionable saints. You don't have ambergris, but you do have dried apple peel, and you knot it into a pouch with such conviction that, for a moment, the pouch feels like armor. You breathe through it, and it smells like last harvest, like October sun, like before. The day stretches and bends. You lie on the straw mattress, your back scratches, your nose itches. You debate whether scratching counts as luxury, and fever finds you not as heat, but as imagination. You're not sick, not really. You're feverish with vigilance. Sleep comes in scraps. In one dream, the flagellants march through your room, leaving neat red lines across the blanket where the stitching already runs. In another, the rats carry tiny whips and scold you for under-seasoning the stew. You wake with a laugh that shakes into a shiver. Third joke of the night, even my nightmares have terrible management. You ration candles like prayers. The small flame pleats your shadow on the wall. It makes a pilgrim of your hand. You think about the theory of bad air, the miasma people speak of with such certainty, and you crack the shutter a thumb's width to trade stale breath for night breeze. The street is empty now. A strip of moon turns puddles into coins you're too tired to pick up. Far away, the chant softens, the whip slow, and then the sound is gone. Oddly, you miss it. The noise was proof other hearts still beat. In the morning, the procession has left tokens. White crosses chalked on doors, little slips of parchment with prayers, a smear of ash near the well. You study them from a distance, as if they were runes. The chalk cross is both comfort and condemnation, protected or marked. The parchment says something about mercy that you wish you could believe without squinting. You decide to keep the ash for your hearth, just in case holy soot burns hotter. You slip into a routine that pretends to be wise. You warm water with vinegar and bathe your hands until the knuckles crack. You sun your bedding across the fence like sails, because a traveling merchant once claimed sunlight kills foulness. Historians still argue whether households like yours slowed transmission with such habits, or whether survival is mostly luck dressed up as discipline. You don't argue. You pin the sheets and let the light do its quiet work. A woman appears at noon, wrapped in a cloak dyed so dark it swallows edges. She's not a nun, not exactly. She calls herself a penitent and offers to leave a relic if you make confession through the door. You speak softly because your sins feel like small birds, startled by volume, happier in a whisper. You confess impatience, envy, the time you kept a second crust you could have shared. You stop short of confessing that last week you shut the door on the baker's daughter. The silence afterward is a plank you can't step from. The penitent murmurs absolution and slips something under the threshold, a strip of linen knotted 7 times. You decide to keep it. If nothing else, it will tie your hair back while you scrub. News, if you can call it that, reaches you like a rumor leaning on a crutch. The flagellants were turned away from a town upriver. The bishop sees them as rebels in disguise. You remember a fact the friar muttered before he vanished, that a pope sitting in Avignon condemned these groups, said their self-made rights threatened the church's order. Whether that happened last month or last year is fog in your mind, but the gist holds. Even authority can be afraid of the wrong kind of zeal. There's a comfort in hearing that power can say no, though it arrives late and carries a cough. Afternoon tilts toward gray. You set a pot to simmer, onions, stale ale, a pinch of salt you're not supposed to use all at once. The steam fogs the air with sweetness and makes the house smell like a decision to live. You remember the children's rhyme and stuff, a pocket full of posies, actual posies, tiny and brave, and you tuck them above the door. If fragrance could argue with death, you'd let it debate all night. Your thoughts wander where your feet cannot. You imagine the flagellants camp at dusk, backs crisscrossed, a bowl of thick soup passed hand to hand, a hymn stitched with more breath than tune. Perhaps they laugh a little too, because people always do between chapters of fear. Perhaps they tell stories of towns that prayed and survived. Historians still argue whether those safe towns had better luck, better practices, or simply fewer fleas. You let the idea of a safe town rest on your tongue like a word you might someday pronounce in the open. As night gathers, the wind changes and carries something green from the fields. It reminds you that wheat still grows without permission, that birds will nest in spring even if no one names the months. You close your eyes and breathe carefully, as if air were fragile and you could break it with a sigh. You think of the welted backs, the chalked crosses, the linen knot in your palm. You think of your own unwhipped skin and the bruises fear leaves instead. You decide you will not look for meaning in every ache. Tonight, you will settle for warmth, for the small sleep that follows onion soup, for the candle guttering low enough to fail. Before you lie down, you push a little jar deeper into your chest of drawers, your hoard of thrifted miracles. Inside, dried apple peels, a pinch of thyme, a smooth stone from the river that looks like a bean, and, don't laugh, a feather you once swore was lucky because it landed on your shoulder the day the tax collector missed your lane. Tiny reliquaries make tiny braveries. You pat the lid and say, guard. The word feels foolish and, somehow, useful. You crawl under the blanket, straw rustling like timid applause. You listen, not for whips now, but for the ordinary symphony you've started to crave. The rafters creak, the hearth sigh, your own measured breath. If the flagellants are right, the sky is listening. If the scholars are right, the fleas are not. If neither is right, you still have soup and the soft, stubborn decision to keep your lungs busy. On a night like this, that's a kind of theology. Sleep edges closer and you let it. No rituals, no promises, no bargains, just the weight of cloth, the ember's pulse, the slow retreat of thoughts into quieter rooms. Somewhere, down the road, leather strikes skin again, or memory supplies the sound, and you drift on that rhythm, the world's lullaby rough as rope and steady as a tide. The next morning smells of smoke and rain. Your door is rimmed with ash from last night's fire, and the air feels like someone's exhale, heavy, sour, alive. You open the shutter to see the street nearly empty, just a few shapes moving through the mist. It's quieter than church after the sermon. The flagellants have gone, leaving behind a town that looks hollowed out. You can see the marks they drew, white crosses, faded parchment, black streaks of soot, and in the middle of the square a pile of burned bedding still smolders faintly. You realize quarantine has begun, not by decree. No one needs to declare it. People simply stop opening doors. A kind of unspoken truce settles over the village. Stay apart, stay alive. The cobbler shouts through his window when he wants bread. The baker leaves loaves on a stool by his wall. You pass by, nodding, but you don't speak. The whole town has become a series of whispers carried by wind. Your cottage grows smaller each day. You've blocked every crack with cloth soaked in vinegar and lavender. The smell stings, but it feels protective. You boil everything, spoons, buckets, your patience. You even hold your breath when lighting the hearth, as if air itself were plotting against you. Historians still argue whether these early quarantines worked at all. Some say isolation slowed the spread, others claim it only deepened despair. You don't need the verdict. You already know what loneliness feels like. It's the creak of the floorboards answering your voice when no one else does. The days blend like overcooked stew. You wake, eat, clean, wait. Your bread turns hard, your cheese blue. Water tastes metallic no matter how long you boil it. The rats are quieter now, but you still hear them sometimes, a soft rustle near the rafters that reminds you you're never really alone. You start talking to them. You give them names, Gregory, Mildred, and the fat one you call Bishop, because he's always eating. "Morning, Bishop," you murmur as you stir the pot. He squeaks, unimpressed. It's ridiculous, but it keeps your mind steady. You even share crumbs, then scold yourself for it. Sharing food with vermin during a plague, what's next? Adopting fleas. You laugh softly, because if you don't, the silence might crush you. One afternoon, you step outside for the first time in days. The air tastes wet and gray. The street looks like someone pressed pause on life. Doors barred, windows dark. A dog barks in the distance, the kind of lonely bark that sounds like an echo of its own name. You walk to the well, careful not to touch the rope, and lower your bucket. The water comes up cloudy. You pour it back, decide rainwater will do instead. On your way home, you see the baker's house. The shutters are open, the door ajar. You hesitate, then call out. No answer. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of yeast and rot. A loaf still sits on the counter, half-baked, dusted with flour like snow. You realize mid-reach that no one's been alive here for days. You take nothing, just close the door gently and whisper, "Rest easy." Historians still argue whether the Black Death wiped out 1/3 or 1/2 of Europe's people. Numbers are cold things. What you know is this: one family missing leaves enough silence to sound like half the world. You ration what you have left: bread crusts, dried beans, stale ale. You try making soup with rainwater and garlic because garlic is supposed to ward off disease, or maybe vampires. At this point, you'd welcome a vampire. At least they ask permission before entering. To pass the time, you clean obsessively. You scrub walls until your arms ache. You rearrange your single shelf, then undo it just to do it again. You've never been so productive in such a small space. You discover a strange peace in the rhythm. Scrape, wipe, hum, repeat. It's almost meditative, almost holy. You even invent games with yourself. How long can you hold your breath between lightning strikes? Can you guess which log will pop next in the fire? It's absurd, but it makes the hours pass. Somewhere, laughter still exists. You can feel its ghost hovering near. On the 4th week, food runs low. You brave the streets again. The air feels stale, thick with the residue of fear. You knock at 3 doors, receive no answer. At the 4th, an old man answers with eyes too bright and hands that tremble. "You're still here?" he rasps. You nod. He chuckles weakly. Then either God loves you or forgot you. You share a little of your ale, sip by sip, keeping distance. He tells you he used to play the lute in taverns before the sickness. You ask him to hum something, and he does, a melody so soft it almost disappears in the wind. It's the first music you've heard in a month. You feel tears before you realize you're crying. That night, you hum it back to yourself just to remember what hope sounds like. The following morning, smoke drifts from the town square. A handful of survivors gather there, keeping space between them like chess pieces, avoiding capture. Someone is burning what's left of the dead's belongings. Clothes, tools, blankets. The smoke curls high and lazy, gray against gray sky. You join in silently, tossing in a broken chair, a cracked cup, anything that can burn. The fire snaps and sighs. For a moment, it's almost beautiful, the way destruction makes light. A fringe rumor circulates among the few who remain. The smoke cleanses the town. They say breathing it will protect you, that the fire's heat kills whatever the air carries. You breathe deeply, eyes stinging. It smells like wood, memory, and faintly like bread. You decide to believe it. Why not? Hope, after all, is contagious too. Evening brings rain again. You patch the leaks in your roof with scraps of linen. The drops drum on the thatch, steady as heartbeat. You light your last 2 candles, deciding they're worth the luxury. Shadows dance on the wall, gentle and slow, like ghosts with good manners. You talk to them. You tell them about your day, the fire, the song, the old man's laugh. You tell them you're afraid, but not as much as before. You tell them you'll clean the house again tomorrow, because it's something to do. The shadows listen patiently. Historians still argue whether survivors of the plague suffered more from sickness or solitude. You could answer that. Solitude, every time. The body recovers faster than the mind. You wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding. It takes you a moment to realize why. The silence is gone. Outside, someone is singing, a woman's voice, low and trembling. The tune is unfamiliar but beautiful, like a lullaby, meant for the earth itself. You creep to the shutter and peek out. In the street stands a figure with a candle in her hand, face half hidden by her hood. She sings to the darkness, not for it. You watch until the flame gutters out, and she fades back into shadow. You never see her again, but you remember the song. It lodges in your chest like a heartbeat that isn't yours. Morning comes pale and wet. You boil rainwater, eat the last of your bread, and decide you'll go to the church today. It feels wrong not to. The doors hang open, the pews empty. The air smells of wax and dust. A single shaft of light falls across the altar, where the chalice still sits untouched. You kneel, not because you expect an answer, but because it feels human. You whisper, "Still here?" And for the first time in weeks, you believe the words might matter. The next morning, the sky is the dull color of tin, the kind that feels too heavy to lift. You notice movement near the church, figures wrapped in thick leather and cloaks that gleam faintly with oil. At first, you think soldiers have come. Then you see the masks, long curved beaks like monstrous birds, round glass eyes that catch the light and turn it cold. For a moment, you think death itself has learned to walk on 2 legs. But no, these are the new doctors, the plague men. They move carefully, deliberately, like performers in a grim play, each step measured, each gesture exact. You've heard rumors of them, physicians who wear strange beaked masks filled with herbs to filter the air, their robes soaked in vinegar or wax. Some say they can cure the pestilence, others say they only measure it. You're not sure which is worse. You watch from the shadow of your door as one bends over a cart, inspecting a bundle that was once a person. The beak dips, the head tilts, the gloved hand reaches to press something to the chest. Then a small shake of the head. The gloved fingers draw a symbol on a slate, another tally in a list that will never end. Historians still argue whether those masks helped at all, or whether they were more theater than medicine, a kind of hopeful costume. The truth doesn't matter to you. What matters is how they make you feel. Something between awe and terror, reverence and nausea. Like seeing angels who took a wrong turn. You edge closer, enough to catch the smell. It's sharp and foreign, mint, vinegar, something smoky underneath. The scent cuts through the rot, a thin reminder of cleanliness, of effort. You almost want to believe it works. Stay back, one of them calls. The voice is muffled, but firm. You nod and lift your hands, palms open. He studies you through the glass eyes, then gestures for you to return indoors. Avoid the dead, he adds. You almost laugh. You've been avoiding the living for weeks. When he walks away, you exhale for the first time in minutes. That afternoon you find yourself thinking about those masks, about the way the beak juts forward, stuffed with herbs, juniper, lavender, camphor, anything thought to ward off bad air. You remember hearing a friar once claim the air itself was poisoned by sin. If that's true, maybe those doctors are walking confessions, wrapped in repentance and rosemary. You try to make your own version, of course. You cut a nose shape from an old piece of bark and tie it with string, then fill it with crushed sage and garlic. You look ridiculous, but you feel safer, if only because the smell of garlic is so strong it could scare away death, or at least your appetite. You catch your reflection in a puddle and laugh quietly. Behold, you whisper, doctor of nothing. The joke helps. The absurdity is medicine. Later, you watch the doctors again. They move door to door, accompanied by two assistants carrying poles with hooks. They lift blankets from windows, check for movement, mark doors with chalk. You realize they aren't just healers. They're also record keepers, witnesses to the end of things. One bends to speak through the door of a house across the lane. A faint voice answers. The doctor nods, says something soft, then drops a pouch through the window. You imagine herbs, maybe vinegar, maybe hope in a bag. You wonder what kind of person chooses this work, what kind of courage or madness it takes to face the plague each day. You almost want to thank them, though you don't know for what exactly. For showing up, perhaps. For not running. For dressing up as sanity in a world that's lost its mind. Historians still argue whether these physicians were heroes or opportunists. Some were city-appointed, others self-taught. Some outright charlatans who charged a fortune for useless tonics. But in this moment, watching them vanish into the fog, you decide they're brave. Or maybe you just need someone to be. By evening, the fog thickens. You light your candle early, its flame flickering gold against the gray. You can't shake the image of those masks. You dream of them that night, hundreds of bird faces bending over the world, whispering prayers through beaks full of time. You wake sweating, your heart beating too fast. The candle's gone out. The air feels heavy again, close. You sit up, whispering a joke to calm yourself. Congratulations, you're afraid of birds now. Add that to the resume. It helps a little. You open the window for air. The night outside hums softly, as if the world itself is sighing. And then, faintly, you see one of them again, alone this time, walking by lantern light. The glow catches the mask, the long curve of the beak, the gleam of glass eyes. He pauses, tilts his head toward your window, and for one heartbeat you think he sees you. Then he raises his hand in a small, slow wave, a gesture of reassurance or farewell. You can't tell. You raise yours back. He turns and walks away. In the days that follow, more of them appear. They bring small packets of herbs to hang over doorways and bottles of rose water for the few who can pay. They burn sulfur in the streets, claiming it purifies the air. The smoke stings your eyes, but not your skepticism. Still, you stand in it willingly, arms crossed, as if bathing in its bitterness might make you immune. A strange sense of order returns. The doctors move methodically, the carts follow, the bells toll at fixed hours. It feels almost like routine, an imitation of stability. You catch yourself timing meals by the sound of footsteps outside. The world has become a schedule of despair, and somehow that steadiness comforts you. One afternoon, you hear a knock, not frantic, not fearful, just polite. You open the door a crack. A doctor stands there, his mask close enough for you to see dust in the seams. "Are you well?" he asks through the beak. You nod. Mostly, you manage. He tilts his head. "No fever?" "Only from fear." You see his shoulders shift, a laugh maybe, or a sigh. "Then keep fearing. It means you're still alive." He sets a small pouch on your step and moves on. Inside, you find a mix of herbs, wormwood, sage, and a few dried rose petals. You hang them near the hearth because why not? The scent fills the room, earthy and faintly sweet. You imagine the doctor's gloved hands arranging them, steady despite the chaos. You wonder if he ever takes off the mask, or if he's forgotten the shape of his own face. That night, as rain patters on the roof, you sit by the fire and think about survival. You're not sure if it's luck, faith, or stubbornness keeping you breathing. Maybe all three. You recall a rumor that some towns built walls to keep sickness out, locking even their own people inside. Historians still argue whether that cruelty saved lives or cost them. You decide that survival is never clean. It's mud and compromise, garlic and grief. You look at the pouch of herbs, the flickering flame, the empty stool across the room. "Here's to us," you whisper, "to the living, the hiding, the pretending." You raise your cup to no one and drink the stale ale anyway. Outside, the doctors pass again, their lanterns glowing through the mist. For a moment, their shadows flicker on your wall, tall, strange, almost gentle. You close your eyes, breathe the mingled scents of smoke and sage, and imagine they are guardian angels in disguise. Maybe they are. Maybe they're just men in masks. But for tonight, as the wind hums and your candle burns low, you let yourself believe the world still holds a few people brave enough to walk into the dark. Blame arrives before dawn, sliding under doors faster than any draft. You feel it in the way people look at one another, quick, sideways, counting sins like coins. The beaked doctors are still patrolling, the flagellants have trailed away, and in the vacuum comes a different procession. Whispers. They move quicker than carts, lighter than smoke, and heavier than stone. You hear them even when you try not to. Who brought the pestilence? Who angered God? Whose well is too clear? Your stomach tightens. You know where this is going. It begins small. A neighbor mutters that foreigners carry strange airs in their clothes. Someone else suggests the market weights have been enchanted, because how else did flour turn scarce so fast? The old man who once hummed for you is told to stop playing. Music, they say, tempts fickle spirits. You want to laugh at the logic, but your mouth won't open. A meeting forms in the square, not announced so much as gathered by gravity. A dozen faces, then a score, all speaking in the same brittle register. Fear has found a voice, and it wants an object. The first accusation is shapeless. Poison in the air, poison in the bread, poison in the rain. But soon it learns to point. It points at travelers. It points at healers whose remedies failed. It points at the quiet family near the well, different in dress and Sabbath, who have lived beside you for years without complaint. Your pulse goes loud. You know where the story of plague and blame has gone in other towns. You've heard the rumors like stones in a cup. Across Europe, whole communities have been accused of well poisoning and driven out, even slaughtered, while officials either looked away or led the charge. That is the plain fact, colder than the wind that cuts through your cloak. The beaked doctor tries to help at first. He raises a gloved hand and says the sickness spreads by breath and closeness, not by malice, that burning neighbors will disinfect nothing. His voice carries authority, and for a heartbeat you want to applaud. But someone laughs in that brittle way, and laughter is contagious when courage is not. A burly man claims his wife got spots after buying bread from the accused family. Another swears the well water stung his tongue. The medical term, apparently, is bad vibes. You would roll your eyes if it weren't so dangerous. You feel the old child's rhyme humming in your pocket, posies at the lintel, posies on your breath, flowers, not facts, to fend off fear. You think of Bishop the Rat, of onion soup, of a life built of small, stubborn kindnesses. You think of the paper cross the flagellants left, how easily chalk can become a target. This is wrong, you whisper to yourself, which is both true and completely insufficient. A woman speaks up. They don't drink from the well like we do. She means the family near the orchard. You almost say, they draw at different hours, the way they always have. But the air is not taking corrections today. Someone lifts a torch. Another brings rope. Panic holds a vote. And congratulations, the motion passes unanimously. You wish meetings about repairing bridges moved this fast. Historians still argue whether the violence that followed in towns like Strasbourg and beyond was driven more by theology, economics, or the crude leverage of fear. You think the answer is yes. When people are hungry, when rents are due, when creditors vanish with the dead, any pretext can be braided into a whip. And once braided, it stings. You don't watch what follows in detail. We won't dwell there. You see enough. Doors kicked, a chest dragged into the street, a family herded toward the square while someone shouts about purifying the well. Your hands shake. Your feet won't move. The beaked doctor tries again, louder. He cites the Pope, an actual bull declaring that plague is not caused by those accused, and that the sick die in places where those communities are absent too. A few listen, then shrug. The torch keeps being a torch. You slip away because courage is not the only virtue. Sometimes it's just a synonym for you got hurt next. In the alley behind the baker's house, you find the youngest from that family hiding behind stacked wood, eyes wide, breaths clipped. You recognize the universal language of terror. You don't think, you act. Here, you whisper, lifting the loose board you discovered weeks ago while searching for kindling. A narrow space, a borrowed hiding place. Breathe slow. You pass a crust through the gap and tuck in your own linen knot, the sevenfold charm the penitent gave you, which has exactly as much power as kindness does. You hope that's plenty. When you return to the square, the crowd has chosen theater over thought. They lower a rope into the well to cleanse it. And some genius suggests tossing in herbs to perfume the sin away. Someone actually proposes rosemary, and you almost shout, "Leave my soup out of this." Third joke of the day, desperately small. If superstition had a cookbook, the chapter on wells would be an unseasoned stew. You keep it to yourself. Humor feels like contraband. Quirky tidbit, because even doom collects oddities. A man swears that tying a live hen under your armpit draws the poison from buboes. He holds up an irritated chicken like a physician displays a tool. The crowd nods at the logic with grim relief. You think of the beaked doctor's measured hands, the herb pouch he left you, the thin line between theater and treatment. Historians still argue whether such drawing cures offered any real comfort or only bruises. You don't need a study. The chicken looks miserable. And so does the man. By afternoon, the smoke of burnt belongings rises again, this time smelling not like release, but like erasure. You stand far back, the heat on your face, the same heat that cooked bread last autumn and warmed a child's hands in winter. Fire has no ideology, it just takes what it's given. You notice, faintly and absurdly, that your crocodile dung sunscreen, remember that imaginary recipe you joked about, that would be an upgrade on today's remedies. At least it would keep people at a respectful distance. The beaked doctor finds you there. "Do you have water?" he asks, voice muffled by the mask. You hand him your flask. He tips it carefully, never touching the rim, and hands it back with a nod. "They want a villain," he says, not looking at the crowd. "Villains are easier to bury than fleas." He pauses. "Keep to your house. This fever of the mind travels faster than the other." Evening lowers its lid. The square empties, embarrassed by daylight's honesty. You circle back to the shed and tap the board twice. 2 taps answer. Relief makes your knees weak. You pass another crust, whisper that night is a kind of curtain, and that curtains are for changing scenes. "We'll wait," you say, voice steadier than you feel. We're very good at waiting. At home, you hang the herb pouch by the hearth and tuck the posies tighter in the lintel, little foolish guardians. You speak softly to whatever listens, the rafters, the ember, the patient dark. "May we be remembered for how we kept each other," you say, because sometimes prayers are just to remind you what you want to be true. You ladle onion soup into a cup, set another cup beside it by habit. Then leave it there because someone in a hidden space might be hungry later. You sit, you breathe, you count. You let the anger pass through you like smoke, because if it stays, it will set a fire you can't put out. You count what you still believe in. Soup, knots, pockets full of posies, doctors who wave at windows, songs sung to the dark, boards that lift, hands that help. You don't count the rest. Before sleep, you listen for the well, half expecting it to speak. It doesn't. Water keeps its counsel. You think about how easily people turned on their neighbors, how quickly fear learned to spell names. You think, too, of the beaked doctor's reminder that authority has, at least once, said no to lies. You tuck that fact beside your heart like flint. You might need to strike it for sparks later. The night deepens slower than oil, softer than vinegar on the tongue. Somewhere, A chicken complains to the moon. You almost laugh. You choose sleep anyway, because tomorrow will ask for steadier hands, and your best answer to cruelty is to wake with them. You wake before dawn, the air sharp and damp, the kind of cold that bites through cloth and skin alike. The village smells of wet earth and faint smoke. The well is quiet again. No crowd, no shouting, no more fire. The world has calmed, but not in the way peace feels. This is the stillness that comes after exhaustion, not understanding. You know it's time to leave. Your food is nearly gone. The herbs have browned, the bread's a memory. Even the rats have grown thin. You gather what you can, a heel of cheese, your little pouch of apple peels, and time, a cup, your knife. You wrap them in a piece of linen and tie it tight. When you step outside, the air feels lighter, but the silence presses. A different fear waits beyond the fields, and you intend to meet it before it comes looking. Historians still argue whether fleeing helped anyone survive. Some towns sealed their gates, others scattered to the hills. Some found refuge, others carried the plague with them. You're not thinking about contagion, though. You're thinking about space, about breathing air that hasn't already been exhaled by the dying. The road out of the village looks almost beautiful under mist. Grass grows in the ruts where carts once rolled. Here and there, you see footprints, some deep, some half washed away by rain. You wonder who they belong to and whether they made it farther than you will. You keep walking. A mile out, you pass a farmhouse. The door swings in the wind. You call out softly. No answer. Inside, the hearth is cold, but on the table sits a bowl of dried beans and a wooden spoon, as if someone planned to return. You take a handful, leave your last candle in exchange. A fair trade, you decide. Farther along, you see smoke rising from a copse of trees. Your stomach tightens, bandits maybe, or others fleeing like you. You crouch low, creeping forward until you glimpse figures around a small fire. 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. Their faces look hollow, clothes ragged, eyes wary but alive. One holds a walking stick carved with strange symbols. You decide to risk a greeting. They flinch when they see you, but relax when you lift your hands. The woman gestures for you to sit. No one speaks for a while. The fire does the talking, snapping softly in the chill. You share your beans. They share stale bread and water that tastes faintly of mint. Eventually, the woman speaks. Where from? You tell her, your village, the sickness, the silence. She nods. Same. Ours burned. Her voice cracks on the word. The man with the carved stick adds, We're heading north. They say a monastery near the mountains took in the healthy. Do you believe that? You ask. He shrugs. I believe in walking. You like that. Simple, practical faith. Belief with blisters. You travel together the next day. The company feels odd but welcome. You learn their names, Elsa, Hannah, and the older man, Lucas. He claims he was a scribe once, writing letters for merchants who couldn't. Letters still matter, he says. Someone has to remember words. That night, by the fire, he shows you a small scrap of parchment, covered in cramped ink. A prayer, maybe. Or a recipe. He says it's a charm against despair. You can't read all of it, but one line stands out. We live not by breath, but by remembering to breathe. You murmur that like a mantra as you fall asleep, the words curling around you like smoke. The next few days blur into motion. Fields, woods, streams. Sometimes you see distant farms, sometimes only crows. You grow used to the quiet company of travelers. You share stories, how Elsa once sold honey, how Hannah was supposed to be married in spring, how you once thought boredom was a curse. You laugh at that. I'd give anything to be bored again, you admit. Lucas chuckles softly. Careful what you wish for. The saints have a sense of humor. Historians still argue whether fleeing peasants helped spread the plague through the countryside. It's easy for scholars to debate. Harder when the choice is between starvation and the unknown. You walk because stopping feels like dying politely. You cross a small river on a rickety bridge. The boards creak but hold. On the far side, a cluster of cottages sits half hidden by fog. You approach cautiously. The place looks deserted. Doors ajar, no smoke. Yet one cottage has a faint glow. Lucas insists on checking. You follow, ready to run. Inside, a woman lies on a bed of straw, breathing shallowly. Her face is flushed, her lips dry. You know the signs immediately. Elsa mutters, "She's still alive." "Barely," you say. Lucas kneels beside her, murmuring a prayer. You stand by the door, torn between pity and panic. Helping means risking everything, but walking away feels worse. You wet a cloth with water and press it to the woman's forehead. She stirs slightly, whispering something you can't catch. Historians still argue whether plague victims truly wanted company in their final hours, or if fear silenced them into solitude. You think you understand now? It's not about wanting company. It's about someone seeing you, even once, before you vanish. You stay until her breathing slows, then stops. Lucas closes her eyes. No one speaks. You cover her with a blanket, whispering the only prayer you remember. Still here. Then you step outside into air that suddenly feels colder. That night, no one sleeps much. The stars feel too close, like 1,000 watching eyes. You wonder how many prayers they've overheard this year alone. You dream of bells, soft, far away, endless. When you wake, the others are already packing. Lucas looks older somehow, the ink charm tucked into his coat. The road narrows through hills now. You pass fields turned wild, sheep grazing untended. At one point, you spot a scarecrow wearing a wide-brimmed hat, arms outstretched. For a heartbeat, you think it's a person calling for help. Then the wind shifts, and it waves like farewell. By the fourth day, Hannah starts coughing. Just a tickle at first, then deeper. You all notice, but no one says anything. You tell jokes instead, bad ones, to fill the air. Maybe it's the dust, you say. Maybe it's your singing, Elsa counters. You smile, but the fear in her eyes mirrors yours. That night, the coughing worsens. Lucas moves closer, murmuring prayers, while Elsa grips Hannah's hand. You sit apart, staring into the fire, wishing it could burn sickness like smoke. At dawn, the coughing stops. So does Hannah's breathing. Elsa weeps quietly. Lucas prays again. You just sit there, numb. When it's time to bury her, the ground is too hard. You pile stones instead. You place your lucky feather on top. The wind takes it almost instantly, and you let it go. You walk on, fewer now. The hills flatten into open land. The air smells cleaner here, or maybe that's just what hope smells like. You see deer in the distance and birds in the trees. The world still remembers how to live, even if people have forgotten. That night, you sit with Lucas and Elsa by the fire. He tells you a story about the ancients, how some believed the stars were holes in the firmament where souls escaped. Maybe the plague just tears the sky faster, he says, half a smile under his beard. You reply, then we should keep patching it, one kindness at a time. He laughs softly. You'd make a fine scribe. You think maybe you already are, just not with ink, but memory. You close your eyes, and for the first time in months, sleep feels like rest, not surrender. You walk until the world stops looking like home. The land opens wide, fields folding into marsh, the air tasting faintly of iron. You don't talk much anymore, not from anger or mistrust, just because words feel expensive now. Every sentence must earn its keep. Elsa keeps her hood low, clutching the rosary she carved herself from cherry pits. Lucas hums sometimes, scraps of psalms that sound like lullabies for the weary. You join in when you remember the words. The tune never quite matches, but harmony seems unnecessary in a world that's still learning to breathe. The villages you pass are half alive. A candle here, a moving curtain there. One man waves from a field, but doesn't come closer. Everyone measures distance with their eyes. You can tell who's surviving by the smoke above their roofs. Thin for hunger, thick for fear. A road sign half buried in mud points toward a market town 10 miles north. You follow it because direction feels like destiny. The road is littered with remnants of what used to be order. Broken wagon wheels, scattered tools, a single shoe that looks almost new. Lucas mutters that once officials patrolled these roads to collect taxes and enforce laws. Now, he says, the only law is stay alive if you can. Historians still argue whether the plague caused the collapse of feudal order or merely revealed how fragile it already was. You think of the lords who fled their manors, leaving peasants to bury the dead and govern themselves. You think of priests who vanished or died trying to serve. When power runs away, people improvise, and chaos learns to walk upright. You reach the market town by dusk. The gates hang crooked, one half missing. Inside, the streets are strewn with debris, wagon parts, tattered banners, fruit turned to mush. You hear footsteps echo through an alley, then fade. The place smells like mildew and memory. A group of figures huddles near the fountain in the square, eyes hollow, faces wrapped in cloth. You hesitate. Lucas raises a hand in peace. One man steps forward, a tanner, judging by the smell of leather and lye clinging to his clothes. He asks if you're clean. The word catches like thorns in your throat. We're breathing, Lucas replies evenly. The tanner nods and gestures toward the fountain. Water's fine if you boil it. Bread's at the mill. Take what you need. Don't stay after sundown. You don't ask why. You already know. Thieves, sickness, despair. They all prefer the dark. The mill stands at the edge of town, half broken but still holding shape. Inside, grain dust coats everything like frost. A few sacks remain, damp but edible. You fill your pouch. Elsa finds a small hand mill and grinds some into flour. For the first time in weeks, you smell bread baking. It's a thin, lumpy loaf, but the scent alone makes your chest ache. When it's done, you share it in silence. Lucas tears his piece slowly, eyes half closed. This, he says, is civilization. You nod. Warm bread, shared among the living, no crown, no creed, no cathedral required. You might almost call it peace if the night didn't creep closer so quickly. By dark, the town grows restless. You hear shouts in the distance, a crash of metal, then laughter that isn't kind. You pack quickly. Elsa looks toward the sound, jaw tight. Bandits, she says. Lucas grimaces. Or men who used to have rules. You slip into the shadows, hugging the side streets. A group of figures passes by, carrying torches and sacks. Their faces gleam with sweat and greed. You press yourself flat against the wall, praying the wind doesn't betray you. One laughs, swinging a jug of ale. "To the end of days," he shouts. Another replies, "To the beginning of hours." They vanish down the street. You exhale slowly. Civilization, you think, has a very short memory. The next morning, the town feels emptied again. You find the fountain overturned, the statue's head missing. Someone carved words into the base, "All debts erased." Lucas stares at it for a long time. "Maybe that's fair," he murmurs. "The plague forgave everyone the same." Elsa disagrees. "No, forgiveness asks for mercy. This was just math." You can't decide which is truer. Historians still argue whether the labor shortages after the plague truly empowered survivors, giving peasants leverage for the first time. You suppose it depends on who's counting. Power always shifts toward whoever's left standing. You look around at the empty streets and think, perhaps the dead redistributed more than wealth. They redistributed meaning. Outside the town, you see evidence of that shift everywhere. Abandoned farms now belong to anyone who can use them. A few families till the fields with half-broken plows, watching you pass, but not unkindly. They've learned to measure strangers not by birth, but by behavior. Elsa trades some flour for milk. No one asks for coin. Barter feels like honesty reborn. By evening, you reach another crossroads. Lucas slows. His breathing sounds rough. You suggest resting. He insists on pressing forward. "There's a monastery ahead," he says, "where bells still ring." "I've heard them on the wind," he claims. You want to believe him. But as dusk settles, you realize the sound he heard might have been thunder. He stumbles once, then twice. You catch his arm. His skin feels hot, his pulse uneven. He looks at you, eyes glassy. "It's fine," he lies. "You've seen enough to know it isn't." That night, you camp by a stream. Lucas drifts in and out of fever. Elsa sits beside him, murmuring prayers. You gather branches, though the fire feels too small against the dark. You can't stop thinking about all the people who vanished mid-journey, their names lost between mile markers. You whisper to the night, "Let him wake." He doesn't. You bury him by the stream at dawn. Elsa presses his parchment charm into the earth with him, smoothing the soil. You find yourself whispering his line again. "We live not by breath, but by remembering to breathe." Elsa doesn't cry. You think maybe she's used up her tears. You walk on together, the road long and empty. Sometimes you talk to Lucas as if he's still there, because silence feels heavier without him. By midday, you pass a ruined chapel. Its roof has fallen in, but the bell still hangs crookedly in its tower. The breeze pushes through, and it rings, a soft, hesitant sound. You stop, listening. It's faint, but it's enough. Elsa closes her eyes. "He found his monastery," she whispers. You nod, smiling despite everything. Maybe she's right. The world feels different after that. You notice small signs of recovery, a farmer repairing a fence, a child chasing a chicken, smoke curling gently from a chimney. Life is creeping back, cautious but certain. You realize that society hasn't ended. It's molting. The old skin of rules, lords, and tithes is peeling away, revealing something raw underneath. People are making new bargains, smaller and more human. You're part of that, whether you meant to be or not. That night, as you camp beneath a clear sky, Elsa hums the tune Lucas used to sing. You join in softly, the sound weaving between the trees. For a moment, it feels like the world is listening. When you fall asleep, you dream not of death, but of hands rebuilding walls, of fields green again, of laughter echoing through clean air. And somewhere in that dream, A bell keeps ringing, not for the dead this time, but for the living who remain. You move through a landscape that has started learning, the way a scab learns to hold. The days are still thin, but they no longer tear just because you touch them. You and Elsa follow a hedgerow that ends at a cluster of cottages, and this time smoke rises from more than one roof. Somewhere a dog barks and then, miraculously, stops, as if even dogs have agreed to lower their voices for a while. You trade a few beans for a heel of bread, and, without anyone deciding it out loud, you all stand 2 arm lengths apart. Courtesy has become geometry. A boy points you to a barn where you can sleep away from the house. The straw is fresh. A hen watches you like a suspicious landlord. You laugh under your breath and tell her you come with excellent references. Elsa smiles for the first time in days. The curve looks fragile and heroic. You both eat slowly, as if chewing were a kind of prayer. The world isn't fixed, but it's practicing. You unwrap your small hoard, the apple peels and thyme, the smooth bean-shaped stone, the scrap of linen knotted 7 times, and lay them like saints on a tiny altar of crate and candlestick. Callbacks, really. The private museum of things that worked because you believed they did. You know what this is. Superstition with good posture. But you also know it kept your hands busy and your mind from cracking. Whatever helps you exhale, you whisper. Elsa nods, and you swear the hen nods too. First joke. You've reached the stage of plague survival where poultry validates your coping mechanisms. News drifts in like careful weather. A village to the north that shut its lanes and posted watchers, allowing only food in, never faces. A hill town where people took turns minding the sick from a distance, passing soup on long boards like offerings. A monastery that rang bells for the living at dawn and for the dead at dusk to keep the day honest. A thin, stubborn rumor claims Milan escaped the worst by walling up infected houses, stone covering doorways, food passed through small holes, the city choosing masonry over mourning. That one's the mainstream fact everyone repeats with a shrug and a hope. Shut the pest inside and starve it of breath. Historians still argue whether Milan truly fared better or just counted differently. But to you, the story is medicine. Proof that structure sometimes outruns panic. You volunteer to help in the garden behind the barn where someone has returned to the old religion of dirt. Your nails pack with soil. Your shoulders ache in that generous way. Work aches. The owner, a widow with a scarf like a small flag, hands you an amulet cut from parchment. The word abracadabra written in a shrinking triangle, letters collapsing line by line to a single point. Against fever, she says, matter of fact. Quirky, yes, but you've seen stranger shields. You tuck it into your sleeve beside the linen knot. Your inside pocket is becoming a committee. At night, you and Elsa whisper inventory, not of food, though, yes, onions, barley, a spoon of fat tucked in a crock, but of tolerances, how much silence you can endure. How many bells you can hear without breaking. How many breaths you can count before sleep arrives. Your units are new, oddly precise. You decide that hope might be measured like this. If you can plan breakfast, you're winning. If you can plan next week's bread, you're rich. If you can plan boredom, you add, you're basically nobility. Elsa snorts. Second joke, declaring yourself Lord of Tedium, first of your name, protector of afternoon naps. In the morning, the boy's mother leaves a small wax tablet beside the barn door, a slate of words pressed with a stylus and rubbed smooth to reuse. On it, a list of chores: draw water, skim the cream, tend the goat who kicks like a blacksmith. You add yours in tiny letters: mend fence, fix latch, sing to the hen, optional. The woman sees it and covers her mouth to hide a smile. It feels criminally luxurious, this smile that isn't apologizing for existing. You still keep your rituals. You air the bedding, boil the cup, hang posies from the lintel, dab vinegar at your wrists as if pulse points were gates you could guard. You rise with the sun and walk the lane, letting the cold comb through your thoughts. When a traveler appears, you step aside and widen the road with courtesy. When the wind shifts wrong, you retreat and breathe through the herb pouch the beaked doctor left, the memory of his small wave, a talisman you can't hang, but carry anyway. Sometimes hope comes in letters you can't read. An old man shows you a wood tablet he carved with marks that look like music. He says it's a tally of days without a funeral. At the bottom, the line is longer than the top. He holds it like proof. See, he says, we're doing it, living long enough to complain about chores again. The victory feels absurd and perfect. You add another notch. At the edge of the village is a tiny chapel with its door open and benches pushed far apart, every third seat chalked with a cross. You step inside during the off hours when the air smells of wax and old rain. No priest presides, just a schedule pinned to the wall. Names, times, the promise that no one will be alone for more than a day. A young woman in a plain dress sits in the front, reading softly from a book you can't see, her voice like water poured from one cup to another. She stumbles. You realize she's sounding out the words. The plague has created new students of letters, of patience, of each other. You bring your practical lessons, too. You teach the boy how to set a pot swing in the hearth so smoke drafts better and eyes sting less. You show the widow how to braid garlic ropes so they dry pretty as well as useful. The village herbalist, formerly the baker's sister, newly promoted by absence, teaches you to steep yarrow and honey to ease coughing, and not to waste good ale by boiling it to sadness. Medicinal melancholy, she calls it. We've had enough. You clink wooden cups with her in a sober little toast. Third joke, crafting a new beverage trend called flat ale with hints of resilience. 5 stars on the imaginary tavern app. In the evenings, people gather at a respectful distance in the lane for the hour. No one decided this either. The sun just trained you all to meet it halfway. Someone hums a hymn. Someone else recites the weather like prophecy. Frosts lifting, soil thawing, geese returning like overconfident messengers. You ask after faraway friends by describing their habits. The man who mends traps, the woman with the loud laugh, the child who prefers stones to dolls. The roll call has lost names but kept affection. It works. You learn, again, that hope is practical. It likes lists and sweeping. It prefers bread to speeches. It loves a small fixed point to orbit, the way a planet loves a sun. Your fixed point becomes the garden plot behind the barn. You kneel there with Elsa and the widow, pushing peas into the earth with the gentleness you used to save for candles. The world accepts them without comment. The hopeful part isn't the planting, it's the assumption you'll still be here when the vines need twine. A trader pauses at the lane's edge one afternoon, exchanging news for onions. He says some ports now force sailors to sit 40 days offshore before they're allowed to dock, a number borrowed from scripture and sea wisdom alike. Quarantine, he calls it, like a word that tastes of salt and discipline. You tuck it into memory. Historians still argue whether those early quarantines arose here or there, Ragusa, Venice, a dozen stubborn councils meeting behind thick doors, but the contour is clear. In a frightened world, time itself became a fence. You sleep better now, which feels like treason, until you remember sleep is what bodies do when they trust tomorrow not to be a thief. Dreams shift from teeth and bells to smaller magic, a loaf rising just right, a kettle not boiling over, the hen deigning to lay an egg in the very nest you politely suggested. You wake with the soft embarrassment of having been gentle to yourself. Not every hour glows. A cough still freezes the lane, and sometimes the cart passes again, though less often, and now with both grief and craft. Planks planed smoother, ropes that don't cut as they lift. The beaked doctors come rarely, and when they do, they move unhurried, as if they've started to trust the work you're doing without them. The spacing, the boiling, the counting that keeps panic from writing its own math. Historians still argue whether community habit or top-down measure mattered more in the tapering of the pest. You look at the wax tablet of days without bells and think the answer might be both, braided. One late afternoon, the breeze turns warm and foolish. Children you haven't seen in months slip out like rabbits from hedges, their play cautious at first, then louder. They invent a new game with long sticks, touch, withdraw, bow, tag with etiquette. You laugh and your laugh doesn't echo. It lands because there are other laughs to catch it. Elsa leans against the fence, eyes wet and bright, and whispers that she can finally think about next winter without flinching. You squeeze her hand. The squeeze happens quickly, habit, risk, blessing, and you both grin at the scandal of it. When the hen at last grants you an egg, you carry it like a relic to the widow's hearth. You split it 3 ways, each bite a ridiculous banquet. The yolk is the color of return. You taste it, and, for a heartbeat, remember the bakery's warm loaves, the tavern's noise, the priest forgetting where he was in the sermon and laughing with everyone else. Memory stops being a weapon and becomes a map. That night, you lay your amulets in a neat row and add a new one. A pea tendril you found curling around the fence, aimless but certain. You fall asleep counting not breaths, but sprouts. In the dark, the bells ring only once, just once, enough to honor what was lost, not to define what remains. You listen, you breathe, you say your smallest prayer, still here, and realize it has changed tense. Not a plea anymore, not a dare. A statement, a stitch. You pull the blanket higher, a fan whispers somewhere for that soft background hum you taught yourself to love, and the night settles its big, harmless weight across your shoulders like a shawl you can keep. The bells stop. You notice first in your body, a tension missing, a silence that doesn't feel like dread anymore, but like deep exhale. Days stretch long and lazy, the kind of long that farmers measure by shadows rather than clocks. The air smells different too, less of smoke and vinegar, more of grass and something faintly sweet you can't name. You walk to the edge of the village and see the world as if it's been washed. Fields gone wild, yes, but green again, reckless in their joy. You take it slowly, this rebirth. No one declares the plague over. People just begin acting like it might not be everywhere. Doors open wider. Windows stop being barriers and become frames again. The widow hums while hanging linens. The boy chases the hen with new confidence, and Elsa starts talking about planting herbs for flavor instead of medicine. You almost forget that once each of these gestures could have been fatal. Historians still argue when the Black Death ended. The truth is, it didn't. It simply changed rhythm, fading like a fever, leaving behind a body forever marked. You feel that mark in yourself, your steps careful but steady, your laughter soft but unafraid. You wander the lane one morning and realize how empty it feels, but not in the same way. The emptiness now has light in it. Wildflowers push through cracks, bees hum, and you find a bit of comfort in weeds that refuse to care about history. At the edge of the square, you see the beaked doctors one last time. Two of them, standing side by side, masks tilted upward as if sniffing for absence. They speak briefly with the widow, then nod. When they pass you, one stops and says simply, "Keep your distance no longer than needed." You almost smile. It's as close to poetry as medicine gets. After they're gone, you feel oddly nostalgic. You'd mocked those masks once, but now you think you'll miss them. A strange kind of reassurance, like seeing your nightmares retire. Life begins to reassemble itself in tiny, uneven stitches. The mill wheel turns again. A new sign is hung above the tavern. Nothing fancy, just a carved loaf and mug, but the sight of it makes your throat ache. Inside, benches are spaced farther apart, and everyone drinks in near silence as though afraid of startling luck. You sip ale that tastes fresher than memory, and notice how laughter sneaks back in, tentative but determined. Someone starts playing a lute. You freeze at the sound, half expecting it to summon something terrible. Instead, it draws smiles. Elsa even claps in rhythm. "Remember when we were afraid music would tempt the spirits?" she says. "Maybe it did," you reply, "and maybe the spirits liked it." She grins. "Then we should keep playing." Work finds you again, not as command, but as invitation. The widow's son builds new shutters. You help hammer them in place. Elsa joins the herbalist, now officially the village healer, and teaches her everything Lucas once told you. You plant onions, barley, peas. You clean the well one final time, burning rosemary at its edge, and this time the smell feels purifying instead of panicked. A traveler stops by, a thin man with ink-stained fingers who calls himself a chronicler. He writes down stories of survival, noting dates, names, and strange remedies. He asks what you remember most. "The silence," you say. "And how it ended." He nods solemnly. History will need both. Historians still argue how accurate those chronicles were, how much was truth and how much was imagination patched over gaps. But you don't care. You just want the memory to outlive the fear. There's a new kind of trade now. Instead of coin, people exchange skills. The smith repairs tools for cheese. The healer swaps herbs for wool. You find yourself teaching the younger ones how to make vinegar, how to dry herbs, how to keep food through lean times. Preserve everything, you tell them, even joy. It spoils faster than bread. At night, people gather by small fires again, telling stories that blend fact and myth until neither cares who owns which. You add your share, the child who sang to the darkness, the doctor who waved at your window, the hen who judged you daily and lived to tell about it. The children laugh, which feels like proof the world has moved on. One boy asks, "Were you scared?" You nod. Yes, but fear doesn't mean you stop. It just means you keep moving slower, and that's still moving. A strange peace settles over you, not happiness exactly, but relief that no longer tastes bitter. You visit the small grave by the stream where Lucas rests. The parchment charm you buried with him has long dissolved, but someone, perhaps Elsa, has left a small stack of flat stones there, each carved with a single letter. Together, they spell breath. You smile. He'd like that. You sit by the water, feeling the sun on your skin. The world hums softly. A dragonfly lands on your hand, weightless. You don't move. For a moment, you forget to think about survival at all. You simply exist, which might be the purest version of living. The old rhythms return gradually: planting, harvest, prayer, market. But beneath them runs a quieter undercurrent, a collective humility. People speak softer, listen longer. The plague has turned arrogance into caution, superstition into ritual, fear into care. You catch yourself reaching for the door handle twice before stepping outside, not from terror, but habit. You chuckle each time. Historians still argue whether the Black Death's greatest legacy was economic or spiritual. Wages rose, yes, but so did empathy. You've seen both. People look each other in the eyes again, perhaps because they know how easily faces vanish. Autumn arrives sooner than expected. The fields, finely tended, glow gold and thick. The village holds its first real feast since the sickness began. There's music, bread, cider, and cautious dancing. You watch Elsa laugh as she twirls with the widow's son. You clap along, feeling something warm unfurl in your chest. When she catches your eye, she mouths, "Still here." You grin and mouth it back. Later, as dusk deepens, you wander to the edge of the field. Fireflies blink like tiny lanterns, and the air smells of crushed grass and cider. You think of everyone you met, the ones who lived, the ones who didn't, the ones who might still be wandering. You whisper their names softly, as though setting them free. The stars seem closer tonight. You wonder how many belong to those lost souls. Maybe they're not watching from above, but shining through, reminding you that darkness always has holes if you know where to look. When you return home, you sit by the window and stare out at the sleeping village. You realize that the silence now is kind, not cruel. You light one last candle, not for fear, but gratitude. The flame flickers lazily, reflecting in the glass like a tiny sun that refused extinction. You whisper, "We made it." And for the first time, you don't add for now. The first frost arrives like punctuation, soft, glittering, and final. You wake to see your breath hanging in the air, not as fear anymore, but as proof of warmth. The world feels smaller, closer, as if the horizon itself has drawn in to listen. You pull on your cloak, step outside, and hear laughter again, not forced, not fragile. Children chase each other between the thatched cottages, their shouts rising in little bursts of defiance against all that came before. The plague, it seems, has finally loosened its grip enough for joy to breathe. You and Elsa stand at the well, filling buckets side by side. She hums, a tune you've come to recognize as her signal that things might be all right. You smile. "You sing more now," you say. "Because it's safe to hear my own voice again," she replies. The water is cold, so clear it mirrors the sky. You think of how, months ago, this same well was the heart of panic, accusations, torches, despair. Now it's just a well again. Ordinary, miraculous. Historians still argue how long it took for Europe to truly recover. Decades, maybe generations. But for you, healing isn't about years. It's about moments like this. Water clean, bread rising, laughter in daylight. You can live inside that moment. Trade begins to move again, slow but steady. Merchants return with stories and wares from cities half alive. Venice, Florence, Bruges, all bearing scars, but also silk and spices. They bring new words, too, Quarantine, contagion, remedy, like souvenirs of suffering polished into wisdom. You notice how people listen differently now, skeptical but curious, as if faith itself has learned manners. A scholar passes through the village carrying a stack of parchment and a hunger for tales. He asks if you've heard that physicians in Italy are writing about causes, not curses, but particles of corruption in the air. They say the stars may influence it, he adds, then laughs at his own speculation. Historians will argue about it forever, I'm sure. You grin. They're going to argue anyway. Might as well give them material. He jots that down, delighted. You realize how much the world owes to those who wrote, while everyone else was too frightened to speak. Writing is its own kind of survival. The tavern becomes a meeting place again, not just for drink, but for debate. People talk about rebuilding markets, redistributing land, even, shockingly, teaching children to read so that knowledge doesn't vanish with the next fever. You find yourself sitting at the edge of these conversations, listening as farmers discuss wages and priests talk less about sin, more about mercy. The plague burned through hierarchy like fire through dry straw, and now the sprouts of equality are peeking through the ash. Elsa, now working as the herbalist's apprentice, sets a bundle of dried lavender on the table beside your cup. For calm, she says. Will it cure anxiety about taxes? You joke. She raises an eyebrow. No herb is that strong. First joke of the day, a gentle one, just enough to prove the world can still laugh at bureaucracy. A painter visits next, traveling with a wagon full of colors and empty canvases. He asks to sketch survivors, saying, the living must be remembered, not just the dead. You sit for him, uncomfortable at first, until he says, you look like someone who's still listening for bells that no longer ring. You smile, a little sadly. Maybe I am. He paints your expression exactly that way, half serene, half wary. And you realize that's what surviving is, not forgetting, just learning to live alongside memory. When he's done, he leaves the painting with you. You hang it by the hearth, a mirror that doesn't flatter, but forgives. Seasons turn again. Snow falls, melts, and fields bloom anew. The village grows busier, louder. New faces arrive, widows from distant towns, wandering priests, even children orphaned but bright-eyed. They bring accents, songs, recipes. You find that you love the sound of difference. One evening, you sit outside with Elsa, watching fireflies spark in the dark. She talks about the healer's idea of starting a school of herbs, where children can learn what she and Lucas once did. No one should have to guess what plant heals or harms, she says. You nod. Knowledge should be like bread, shared, or it goes stale. She laughs. That's actually good. I might write that on the door. Please do, you reply. Put my name under it so future scholars can argue about my contribution. Second joke, but only half joking. You really do hope someone argues about it someday. Travelers bring stranger news now. In Florence, they say, families who survived are commissioning frescoes filled with skeletons dancing among nobles, a reminder that death makes everyone equal. You picture it vividly, half horrified, half impressed. Humanity's way of coping seems to be painting its nightmares until they look fashionable. Historians still argue whether those dance of death paintings were satire or sermon. You decide they're both. Fear, after all, has a sharp sense of humor. One morning, you wake to the sound of bells, not for the dead this time, but for a wedding. You almost cry at the absurd normalcy of it. The couple stands in the square, garlands of wildflowers around their necks. The priest's voice trembles with joy as he blesses them. Elsa nudges you and whispers, "Do you realize this is the first time we've seen people touch without fear?" You nod, throat tight. "It's the most reckless thing I've ever seen. I love it." You dance that night, badly but with heart. The music spills through the streets, and you lose yourself in rhythm. For the first time, you don't look over your shoulder. You don't wonder if the air will turn sour again. You just move. Later, as the embers fade and people drift home, you sit alone in the square. The moon glows pale above, full and quiet. You think about what's been lost and what's been gained, how death, for all its cruelty, taught life how to savor itself. You run your fingers over the smooth stone at your neck, the one from Lucas's pouch, and feel its warmth from your skin. "Thank you," you whisper, not to any god in particular, just to existence for staying. The wind stirs. It carries laughter from nearby houses, the clatter of dishes, the sound of someone tuning a lute, all the small noises of life returning to itself. Before heading inside, you glance once more at the sky. The stars seem brighter tonight. You imagine each one as a candle lit for those who didn't make it, an endless vigil burning gently over a healed earth. You realize then that survival isn't just living through something terrible. It's the act of tending what remains, mending, teaching, forgiving, planting. It's continuing the story so it doesn't end in silence. You close your eyes and listen. No bells, no cries, just the hush of wind across the roofs. The quiet now feels earned. You whisper, "Still here." And somewhere far away, maybe in another village, someone else whispers it too. You move through your days with a new kind of eyesight, the sort you can't unlearn once it clicks on. Everything looks double now, what it is and what it means. A loaf is food and mercy. A bell is music and memory. A door is wood and a question. Do you open it? The plague taught you this. Loss is a terrible tutor, but it grades on a curve called perspective. You measure time by tasks again, turn soil, mend handle, trade onions for salt, and notice how your hands remember work as if labor were a hymn the body knows by heart. Yet labor itself has changed. There are fewer hands to do it, and the ones that remain are precious. Wages creep up. Promises are backed by bread, not pedigree. You hear of laws in England, the Crown trying to freeze wages where they were before the sickness, as if you could nail the river to the bank. People laugh the bitter laugh of those who've shoveled too many graves to be impressed by decrees. The mainstream fact lands simply. Labor shortages tilt power toward those who work. Statutes can scold, but fields need tending. You feel the shift even here. The smith offers you a fair trade without a lecture on station. The priest thanks you for sweeping the chapel and then, this is new, sweeps the other side. You find yourself collecting small conclusions the way you used to hoard herbs. Number 1, fear is loud, care is quiet and stubborn. Number 2, routine is a raft. Number 3, you can love people you disagree with if you agree to keep them alive. You tack these to the inside of your mind like notes on a tavern wall. If anyone asks, you call them house rules. Art changes around you too, because people need to reframe their breathing. A painter comes back with a panel that shows skeletons waltzing with nobles, grim and strangely joyful, as if death has been cast in the community pageant and discovered good timing. Children stare, then copy it with chalk, turning the skulls into smiley faces. You see carving sprout in door lintels, hourglasses, lilies, little bones tucked among vines. Memento mori, but also memento vivi. Remember, you're alive. Your own contribution is smaller. A pea tendril pinned near the hearth portrait, green proof that curling is not the same thing as collapsing. Historians still argue whether plague made this new aesthetic or merely sharpened a trend already blooming in dark corners. You shrug and pour more ink into the moment that needs it. Whatever its source, the art says aloud what you feel. Endings and beginnings often share a border. Faith, too, molts. The sermons soften. The priest who once thundered now confesses that mystery might be bigger than certainty, which is both unnerving and oddly generous. He speaks of mercy more than tallying faults, of work as prayer, of kitchens as altars. You keep praying the short prayers because they fit in your pocket. Please. Thank you. Still here? You notice people blessing ordinary things, the well at dawn, the door at night, the beds before sleep, like a quiet treaty with the everyday. Sacred creeps into simple. Sacred refuses to leave. Medicine learns its lines in public. Elsa and the healer label shelves, write recipes in a steady hand. A child reads the words and pronounces them with pride, turning time and yarrow into syllables that sound like future. You hear a traveler mutter about apothecaries in far-off cities, separating plague from regular fevers, tracking patterns with the discipline of counting stars. Another tells the legend of 4 thieves' vinegar, how, during a pest, a band of thieves raided houses but stayed healthy by bathing in a brew of herbs steeped in vinegar, then bargained for their lives by revealing the recipe. Quirky? Entirely. Effective? The vinegar certainly won't hurt your cutting board. Still, you tuck the story beside your linen knot and abracadabra triangle. The drawer where you keep hope has never demanded peer review. Humor limps back and then learns to run. It's drier now, gentler, less interested in mockery than relief. Someone coins a phrase for getting through a hard day with only 2 sudden silences and 1 sentimental cry. A good Wednesday. The tavern keeps a list of approved complaints, a rotating menu of grumbles you can borrow so you don't have to invent new ones. Leaky roofs, creaky knees, the hen's opinionated schedule. First joke, you try to register existential dread, and the barmaid says, "Sorry, that one's on tap till further notice." Laughter turns out to be excellent lung exercise. You make a practice of it. The cost of surviving sneaks up on you in small tolls. Some mornings you reach for caution without thinking, a step back at the well, a pause before a hug, and then you forgive yourself for the habit like you'd forgive a scar for not fading. You keep a quiet census in your chest of those who didn't step forward into this lighter air. Marta by the well, the baker's daughter, Lucas humming psalms by a stream. Love persists, it just changes its verb. You tend it, you visit, you say their names into the friendly dark and let the sound land like seed. Once, walking the road at dusk, you meet 2 strangers arguing softly about why some died and others lived. Was it blood or behavior, prayer or luck? You could add to the debate ventilation, spacing, boiling, remembering to breathe, but instead you teach them the chorus you learned in your bones. We did not stop. That mattered. Historians still argue whether good practice or good fortune drew the line. You suspect each borrowed the other's coat. Markets swell again. A printer's apprentice from the city, ink-stained, feverishly alive, claims presses will multiply books so quickly that stories won't have to hitch rides only on tongues. The idea makes you dizzy. words surviving without bodies to carry them. He shows you a page, black letters marching neat as soldiers, and your eyes water with the oddest emotion. Relief for paper. Imagine a world in which medicine can be written down and not merely remembered between coughs. Imagine a recipe that outlives its cook. You kiss your fingers and tap the margin as if the page were a cheek. Second joke. You tell the apprentice to print a guide on how not to burn the stew while waxing philosophical. He promises a 2-volume set. Work reorganizes around absence. Fields change hands. Tools pass with stories attached. And people invent new ceremonies for starting over because old ones required crowds you no longer trust. You and your neighbors cobbled together a feast of firsts. The first egg of spring, the first loaf that rises right, the first evening you forget to count the distance between you and someone you love. You light a candle for each and call it theology with snacks. Third joke, the priest asks if he should bless the table. You tell him the table keeps blessing him with splinters at exactly the right moments of humility. You don't tidy away the darker lessons. You keep them in the top drawer like sharp knives, wrapped and ready for when clarity is needed. Scapegoats, for instance, you vow never to let fear learn names the way it once did at your well. Suspicion, for another, you test it like iron, tapping to hear whether it rings true or just loud. Isolation, you respect its power to save the body and starve the heart, and you promise to open your door before the latter happens again. Some nights you sit beneath the unbecoming honesty of the stars and inventory not possessions, but capacities. How much gentleness you can give without tiring, how much wonder you can bear without flinching, how many times you can say, "Still here," before it thins to a whisper, and then, stubbornly, thickens back into a song. You find the answer changes with weather and bread and how kindly the hen regards you. You accept this. Elasticity is its own strength. When the wind blows from the south, it carries faint bells from towns you haven't seen, weddings, markets, the scraping of a new school's chairs. You picture a map stitched not by borders but by habits, boiling, spacing, sharing, singing at dusk. Across it all, art and prayer mingle like threads in a strong rope. A continent relearns the old truth as if it were a revelation. We live by one another's breath and by remembering to breathe. If you had to summarize the curriculum of mortality the plague forced on you, you'd write it like this on the tavern wall. Learn to lose without choosing cruelty. Learn to mend without hiding the seam. Learn to laugh before certainty, not after it. Learn to love the ordinary with embarrassing enthusiasm. And when the bells stop, don't wait for permission. Plant peas. You go to bed with that silly holy list rattling in your head, and the fan in the corner gives its soft background hum like a promise kept. The house smells faintly of thyme and clean straw. Your amulets sleep in their drawer without complaint. Outside, the night holds its breath, and then, with a long, luxurious exhale, gives it back to you. The world keeps breathing. It does so unevenly, some towns fuller of life, some still pale with memory, but it breathes. You walk farther these days following roads that used to scare you, finding fragments of the old world stitched awkwardly into the new. At a crossroads, someone has planted a signpost carved with 3 words: mercy, patience, soup. You decide that's as good a philosophy as any, and you keep walking. In the cities, bells ring again, though they sound different. Less like mourning, more like metronomes for rebuilding. You visit one. Stone streets swept clean, shop doors open. the smell of baking returning like an old friend. Children play near a fountain without flinching at splashes. The sight makes you dizzy. You realize your body still expects fear to follow joy the way thunder follows lightning. It doesn't. Not today. Historians still argue what the Black Death changed most: faith, economy, art, language. You think it changed pulse. Humanity now beats slower, steadier. It knows itself as something fragile that can keep going anyway. That's the real miracle. Not survival by luck, but survival by learning. You sit in a square and watch a mason repairing a church wall. Each stone he sets in place sounds like punctuation. Still here, still here, still here. He whistles while working, a tune you half remember from before. When he catches you listening, he grins. Can't build in silence, he says. Walls remember better when they've heard a song. You nod, because that's wisdom disguised as small talk. Nearby, a painter is restoring an altar. The images are new. Christ with eyes that look tired but kind. Saints carrying loaves instead of swords. You ask him why, and he says, people want to see compassion wearing a face they recognize. His brush makes soft noises, like breath translated into color. You think of how art keeps teaching what words forget. Trade wagons rattle by again. The air smells of pepper and possibility. But even commerce has gentled. Prices are lower. Greetings warmer. People seem to understand that the world doesn't owe them anything, and so they barter more kindly. A cobbler tells you he gives half his shoes away because bare feet make bad prayers. You smile and buy a pair anyway, not because you need them, but because gratitude deserves an outlet. At night, you stay in a small inn. The owner leaves a basin of clean water by every bed. For comfort, she says. You thank her and hesitate before asking, do you ever worry it'll come back? She looks at the window where the candlelight trembles in the glass. Of course, but worry's not prevention, it's rehearsal. We've practiced enough. You lie awake afterward, listening to rain tap the shutters. The rhythm feels familiar, almost familial. You drift off, imagining every drop washing the last of the plague from the air, polishing the world for morning. When morning does come, you walk out into a marketplace alive with color. Red apples, yellow cloth, blue sky reflected in puddles. The smells, garlic, honey, yeast, hit you like a hymn you forgot you knew. You buy a small roll, still warm, and take a bite so slow it feels ceremonial. The taste floods you with something older than language. You catch yourself laughing at nothing. A vendor looks up and laughs with you, though he doesn't know why. Laughter has become the new contagion, and no one is trying to cure it. You notice the bell tower again, its ropes swaying in the breeze. For a moment, you imagine the bells speak directly to you, saying what no history book will ever fully record, that the living are the true memorials. You travel a little longer, south then east, visiting places where the plague once raged. Every village tells a story, every survivor adds a verse. A fisherman shows you a net mended from a nun's old veil, claiming it brings good catches because it was prayed through once. A child tells you his mother calls the night sky the lantern field, where all the lost souls keep their lights lit until dawn. You nod. That's a good way to think of them. You notice that people no longer whisper about death as an intruder. They speak of it as a neighbor who finally went home. Life, meanwhile, has reclaimed its seat at the table. One day, you return to your old village. The well still stands, surrounded by new houses built where the old ones crumbled. A few of the old faces remain, older now, lined but bright. The widow waves you over, her son, no longer a boy, offers you bread. Elsa runs the apothecary by the church. You smell thyme, sage, vinegar, scents that once meant fear, now meaning health. She greets you with a laugh. You came back. I never really left, you say, just wandered through the long version of home. You sit together in the square, watching the sunset burn red over the fields. The sky looks too large for what's left of your words. She says softly, "Do you ever wonder why we survived?" You think for a long time. Because we kept imagining something after. She smiles, eyes reflecting the fire in the clouds. Then, let's keep imagining. That night, you sleep in your old cottage. The straw is softer than you remember. The wind hums gently through the rafters, steady as breath. Before you drift off, you whisper your old refrain one last time. Still here. It feels smaller now, not an anthem, just a lullaby. You dream of Lucas's parchment charm, the letters glowing like constellations. The words reshaping themselves until they read, "Remember to breathe," and you do. The world exhales with you. The sound of the wind outside your window blends with the faint hum of the fan, or maybe it's just your own pulse, soft and patient. The story has slowed, the light has thinned, and every shadow feels gentle now. You can almost hear the peas rustling in their pods somewhere beyond time, the faint laughter of people learning, again, how to live without flinching. You picture the fields stretching into dusk, gold fading to silver, the well's water glinting in moonlight. There's no fear left there, only quiet industry, the ordinary miracles of survival. The baker kneads dough, the smith sharpens iron, the healer writes down recipes in tidy lines. The bells ring only to mark the hours, and the spaces between them are filled with peace. You breathe in slowly, like you're taking that first clean breath after long confinement. The air tastes of smoke and sweetness, of endings softened by memory. The plague is gone, but its lessons linger, tenderness, humility, the fierce, humble joy of presence. You let those lessons settle around you like a blanket. Your eyelids grow heavy. The candle burns low. The hum becomes a lullaby, the sound of time moving kindly, unhurried. You are part of a long lineage of survivors now, each breathing the same inherited calm, each whispering the same small vow. To keep tending, to keep laughing, to keep loving the ordinary world. The story has quieted, but it hasn't ended. It never really does. Sleep now. The past has forgiven you. The night is gentle, and morning is waiting.